Lots on the plate tonight. The Blackstone Valley Charter School under a little fire. We'll get some perspective this evening.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, I have to tell you, I've been bullish on the Blackstone Valley Prep Project ever since its inception, but, you know, when it rains, it pours. They get whacked on a funding formula and what I think is really a personal battle between the unions in the state and the lieutenant governor, and then they have their own little, for lack of a better term, mini scandal last week. So they got to dig out, and one of their big supporters, and I mean big supporters, is here to talk about this in some kind of perspective tonight. Norman Sandy McCulloch is here. He is a member of the board, the Rhode Island Mayoral Academies, a philanthropist, extremely well known here in the state, and keeps putting up his own dough for the cause. So we'll talk to him coming up momentarily. Great to have you aboard. Thank you very much for tuning in to my State of Mind. Let's go to the rundown and take a look at what's going on. Yeah, if you saw this morning, I caught this press conference prior to sneaking out to the CVS for a little bit. Golf tournament was terrific, by the way. The Wall Street Journal headline here, and here's a summary from CBS.
After 2 years, 107 interviews, and more than $7 million, the House Select Committee on Benghazi has released its final report into the deaths of 4 Americans, including U.S. Ambassador to Libya, Chris Stevens.
No U.S. military asset was ever deployed to Benghazi despite the order of the Secretary of Defense.
The Republican-written 800-page report also found the administration was politically motivated to cite an internet video as a cause for the attacks and not terrorism. The State Department and Secretary Clinton failed to provide better security for the Benghazi consulate, leaving it vulnerable. And members of the Obama administration stonewalled the congressional investigation.
I believe that the government failed its people and lied to the public in the aftermath.
The report is critical of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, but Republicans on the committee insist she was not the focus.
Speaker Boehner asked me to find out what happened to 4 of our fellow citizens, and I believe that that is what I have done.
Democrats say the investigation's purpose was aimed at derailing Clinton's presidential campaign. In a statement, the Clinton campaign said, quote, "This committee's chief goal is to politicize the deaths of 4 brave Americans." Perhaps the most lasting impact of the committee's investigation was the revelation that Secretary Clinton used a private email server during her time at the State Department.
The Republicans say there's a lot new in this report. It's 800 pages long. And to get away from that narrative, in other words, to actually make credible some of the details that they say are brand new, Americans are going to have to read it. Now, how many Americans are going to read it? Not many. However, you know, one of the things that they assert that there's a 2-hour meeting at the White House while the Benghazi attacks were going on, half of which was spent on the politics of working it out with Libya versus actually bringing some kind of armed forces to the catastrophe. Stay tuned on this one. It'll be part of the political conversation, no doubt. It's unfortunate that it's so entwined in the political conversation. Speaking of politics, the Speaker of the House here in Rhode Island had a good day yesterday watching the fiasco. Here's the headline in the Providence Journal. Candidates are filing to run against Nick Mattiello, and John DeSimone actually has a candidate running against him too in his district. DeSimone is the majority leader, but we're going to focus here on the Speaker. So yesterday I talked to Shauna Lawton, who's been here on this program and who will be here tomorrow on the program as well. She was big on the HPV vaccine fight, you know, the mandate. She was against the mandate. I was very impressed with her. Then all of a sudden I saw that she was running. Problem is, there's another guy running who talked to me last week. First, here's Shauna Lawton on the radio show yesterday.
I'm really, really interested in looking at term limits. I think that people need to get into office. They need to serve for a few terms, and they need to move on.
All right, so that's one of her big issues. But Stephen Frias, who's been a longtime Republican loyalist operative, he's a historian. He's run twice early in his professional career. He's a lawyer out of Boston. He was the guy that the GOP establishment, if you could say there is an establishment in that phone booth here in Rhode Island, was recruiting. He announced first last week, and then Ms. Lawton announced yesterday, and Frias was kind of puzzled about it.
My concern is Shauna is you know, doesn't have as much experience. I've already put in $25,000. My campaign account is open. I put in the $25,000. This is going to take money. And so I just said, I've got to do this. I know she may, if she runs, that's her right. I'll have, it'll make, I think it helps the speaker, this, division. But I just think I'm the best candidate. I got the knowledge, I have experience, and I'll have the resources. I'll do the very best I can to shake that place up.
Of course, there's now a rift in the Republican Party, if you can believe that. They can't afford a rift. The chairman is Brandon Bell. He's upset that State Representative Patricia Morgan recruited Ms. Lawton into the race.
I've made no bones about it. I've told her. I said I overwhelmingly support Steve Frias for this race. There were no other contenders. I'm not trying to not give her a fair shot, but my support for Steve is unwavering in his run. I think he can win this seat.
Happiest guy over all this? The Speaker of the House. See him smile? It's actually smiling about something else, but I have a funny feeling. He had a broad smile yesterday. The Republicans sometimes just can't get out of their own way. That they can't listen. Ms. Lawton is a qualified candidate. She'll be here tomorrow. But they got two very qualified candidates, and sometimes someone's got to step aside in order to have an efficient run in an upset chance against the Speaker of the House. But, I don't run the Republican Party, never have, and it seems nobody can. All right, Carnevale investigation. The headline here is fascinating. The state police have actually admitted that they're investigating the gentleman who, had an allergy. His nickname is now Carnevale, with that shirt over his nose. My guess is that this isn't going to go well for him. My guess is that the candidate that has announced, and there is a candidate, we'll remind you yesterday who the candidate, or tomorrow. Can't remind you yesterday. Did we ever find out? It's in there somewhere. Somebody has announced that they're running against Carnevale. It doesn't matter who. They'll probably win by default because he may be disqualified by the time the elections come up. We'll see. All righty, the conversation of the night tonight, Mayoral Academies. Here's the headline today in the Providence Journal. This is a bill that the governor is thinking about signing, which curtails expansion of charter schools, new charter school organizations where the school boards have got to get an approval before that happens first. The governor's still trying to figure out whether she's going to sign that or not. But of course, it comes on the heels of these headlines last week, the Blackstone Valley Prep, with a little bit of a controversy there that reached all the way to Washington. The Washington Post actually had a similar headline. And Sandy McCulloch is here from the Rhode Island Mayoral Academies to chat about that, but really the big picture on charter schools and what they've been doing for the community. Sir, it is a pleasure and an honor to have you aboard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Big picture first, before we get into the controversy. Big picture and why you're committed to the idea of mayoral academies.
That's easy. The first and the overwhelming reason that I'm interested in, and everybody really pays lip service to it, but they really sincerely believe it, is that we are working with the best outcome for 142,000 kids in public schools, period. All of the activities that are going around are focused on that. Unfortunately, an awful lot of the dialogue strays from that to the costs of doing these things, but the fact remains, well-educated 142,000 public school segment means a richer life for them and a stronger economy for the state of Rhode Island. I've always felt that education is at the base of almost everything that is at the root of the world's problems. But here in Rhode Island, there are some wonderful things happening to address the situation in a small, condensed, visible, transparent state where other people can watch what the experiments that we're doing, how they're doing, whether they're any good, and so forth.
All right, hold that thought. When we come back, we're going to talk about last week's controversy, deal with that, and then we'll get to the bigger picture and further into this argument. Stay with us. We'll get to the business of charter schools and how they're dealing with the state of Rhode Island and the challenges going on there. But first, let's talk about the story that happened last week. Eyewitness News covered it.
The 3 teachers involved resigned last week, but school officials say they're still working to rebuild trust with the students, parents, and guardians. Blackstone Valley Prep High School is recovering after leaked teacher messages sent shockwaves throughout the charter school. The messages attacked students and parents, calling them idiots, profanities, and more.
I believe that what the teachers have done is completely wrong, but the privacy factor is also really important to consider, but I am completely supporting the school.
In the wake of the scandal, the school's executive director is hosting meetings with parents and guardians at BVP Elementary School 2.
I've heard what I wanted to hear. I'm happy. I support the school 100%, and it's positive. It's a school. It's a second home for our children, and I'm proud to say I'm a parent of BVP children.
Pictures of the private messages circulated among the students. Many were posted to Twitter and retweeted dozens of times.
I feel bad for my friends that have been treated wrong, but sometimes things just go too far, and I feel as if my friends I personally know are just feeding more to the fire. We've always had a really close relationship with teachers, and we've always been known as team and family community, and I just hope we get to regain that trust.
Norman Sandy McCulloch is on the board at the Mayoral Academies, philanthropist, industrialist, former head of the Rhode Island Foundation, and a real supporter and a ground-up builder of this project. Listen, you got a battle with the General Assembly right now on a couple of different fronts. We'll get to that in our next segment. You needed this like a hole in the head, right? We'd like to have the school administration on, but they took a pass. But you're no one to walk away from a head-on conversation. What did you think about this controversy?
Well, in the first place, I think when you get a situation where you've got 10,000 Teacher America kids out there doing their very best to go into the slums of the schools, every once in a while you're going to find a few bad apples. I'm praiseworthy to the skies of how Jeremy Chiappetta has handled this.
He's the head of the school.
The principal,
Right.
or he's the head of the school.
Right.
Remember, Blackstone Valley has only been in existence for 8 years. We're not even a full high school. That'll happen next year. But he acted instantly on this thing. Didn't try and hide any problems. He brought it right out in the open. And those people were out of a job. In this case, he gave them the option of resigning, and they did at once. And then he began to rebuild that sense of community that has been so significant to the success of these kids.
You know, you make an interesting point, one that I haven't even really talked about on the radio, and we did discuss this at length, and that is that at least at the charter school, you've got the flexibility that when you do have a problem pop up, to address it immediately, as opposed to the other public school formula, which is a lot of negotiation and a lot of mediation and a lot of this time, that time, another try type of thing. In other words,
well, that's not really the flexibility we want in charter schools, but every once in a while, these occasions.
I think that's a selling point, isn't it? That when you have problems, you can address them quickly, whether they be teacher issues, student issues, or whatever.
Well, I want to just re-emphasize that the main problems and advantages of flexibility are working for better education for the kids. And there we have lots of flexibilities to move very quickly. Fortunately, the disciplinary problems don't come up that often, and that's not a real checkpoint necessarily for charters in and of themselves.
Well, clearly I'm not going to get you off your main focus, nor am I going to try. I will say this, though, you needed this, again, like a hole in the head. I mean, you're battling with the legislature right now, and this was a PR week that you'd like to forget. How do you perceive whether it's going to impact long-term the arguments that you make for the benefits of this school and others like it?
This too shall pass. These things come up, they're being handled properly, and we'll go back to doing the good, excellent job that we've already been doing. I'm not concerned about the lasting impact of this. This goes on in public schools that we never hear about.
There you have it. When we come back, the arguments with the legislature are actually the legislative arguments with the charters. I think that's more about what's going on here. Stay with us.
I've said publicly, well, let's hope that you know, cooler heads prevail in making sure that we're not shortchanging any child that's in a public school. Right now, targeting the mayoral academies on that pension issue alone, and making those young kids suffer and the teachers in those schools suffer because you're not in the state pension, it would be just as ridiculous as making an argument because the Cumberland school system does not provide a Social Security benefit in retirement, that somehow because they saved those dollars right in their district that they should be penalized and money should be taken away from those teachers and from that education system. It doesn't hold water yet. That's getting some level of traction, and that's what is absurd about the whole discussion here. Let's do it on good policy, not create bad policy.
A couple of weeks back with Dan McKee, our lieutenant governor, the guy who, on at least a political level, began this Blackstone Valley Prep program, the Mayoral Academy formula. Norman Sandy McCulloch is a board member. I'm certain that you can relate to some of the lieutenant governor's arguments there, but specifically what we were talking about is this new funding formula the legislature put together at the behest of what I think is a union request to make it more expensive for the charter schools by replenishing money to the sending districts with a formula that's very complicated, and it really is all about differences. In other words, at the public schools, we've got to pay pensions and this and that. Well, the charter schools that don't, there'll be a formula to reimburse the sending district. I can't even explain it to anybody. Can you, by the way?
I'm not qualified to explain it.
Can you explain the politics?
Oh, the politics are very simple. They're trying to either render impotent or wipe out entirely the growth of charters and eliminate mayoral academies completely. I'd like to make one point, that mayoral academies, about which there is considerable misinformation or no information, mayoral academies are basically regional charter schools. We reach out there are only 3 of them, by the way. There are only 2,450 people in those mayoral academies. You'd think from some of the dialogue that this is some juggernaut of a parallel educational system that's going to cause confusion everywhere, but they are proving to be one of the most effective ways of introducing new concepts, testing them, and then implementing them. So this has somehow triggered hatred among some of our opponents, that they just want to get rid of probably one of the most promising things for education reform we have in Rhode Island.
Why do you think so?
I don't know. I think, frankly, it's based on retention of power, retention of the status quo. It has resulted in the fact that right next door in Massachusetts, we have the #1 educational achievement state in the country, and Rhode Island is number 30, 1 foot across the border. And we are trying to really address this racial injustice to the kids in the inner city schools by doing everything we can to give them the same kind of quality that they're getting in Barrington and East Greenwich.
Why do you mention those districts?
They are supposedly the 2 top ones in our state, but nobody bothers to ask themselves compared to what. If you do that, you begin to see that that's why we rank number 30 and Massachusetts is #1.
Lieutenant Governor McKee is on kind of a tear trying to do a Mass to Rhode Island comparison, that our blue chip schools, Barrington, East Greenwich, versus the blue chip schools in Massachusetts don't hold up, and that the whole parallel of classification and performance doesn't hold up at all. There's a misunderstanding, I think, in Rhode Island about where even high performing schools flush out.
Well,
in other words, we're not doing as well as some folks would like to think we're doing, right?
Well, what is the number one problem in Rhode Island? I say it's education, but other people say it's economics, and where we stand as a state in terms of our New England, but other competitors. So we are focusing on economic incentives, and Gina's, I think, doing a grand job at that. But at the very base of it, if you connect the dots, a well-educated workforce is absolutely essential to attaining the strong economy.
Where do you think we're going here? I mean, listen, I really do believe that this is in part a personal battle between some of the public employee unions, the representatives that do their bidding at the legislature. The speaker seems to just want to be calculating, how he remains in power, re-education. The governor, I think, has been a good partner of this project, yet she hasn't been that aggressive in her rhetoric. I think this is a personal thing with Dan McKee, Lieutenant Governor. As long as he is, sitting at a pretty high perch now, one step away from Hillary Clinton being elected, he could be the governor. I think these unions are trying to, throw a bomb across the bow here. Yes?
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we're getting nearer a subject that's pretty complex, and that's the culture of this state. And that's going to take years to modify.
You don't think there's a conflict between what McKee has been able to achieve, and all of you folks, obviously, and what the unions are worried about?
I have no time to worry about what the unions are worried about. I'm really worrying about what the parents and the rest of the people in this state are doing for these 142,000 kids.
In other words, it's my job to analyze that stuff. It's your job.
You go ahead with that.
I don't see you telling me that I'm full of it. I think what you're saying is, listen, I don't need to go there because I got a loftier goal, and I think that's what leadership is about, and I respect that. I do.
I don't want to make it a we-they thing, and that's why we had a retreat at our Mayoral Academy board, and we are devoting 50% of our time towards developing district charter collaborative efforts so that we pass on what we're learning in the charter schools to the public schools. That is a progressive effort. That's not fighting people. And I advise you that it's already working in 3 places, in an elementary school, in the Pawtucket Learning Academy, and in Blackstone Valley High School.
Yeah, okay.
9 more schools are going to join that compact next year.
All right. Well, we'll see if the legislature continues. Well, actually, the legislation that has been passed for growth will allow that to happen because the umbrella of the Mayoral Academies is protected, thankfully. It was a pleasure to have you aboard. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
You stayed on message, that's for sure. When we come back, a couple of big losses in the sports world. Stay with us. Tough stuff. Pat Summitt passed away yesterday, right? The age of 64. I mean, she is perhaps the most profound coach in American history. What she did at Tennessee is unmatched. Even Gina Auriemma probably can't catch up. She was a leader in so many ways, big loss. And then Buddy Ryan passes away, a guy who did it his own way, no doubt about it, including clubbing an offensive coordinator one day when he didn't think his defense was getting enough rest. And his sons march on. See you on the radar tomorrow at 3. Good night.